Why, it is October 23rd, 2022. Look out, Herschel Walker, Georgia Ranger. The damn Admiral's here. And it's real. It's real. It's not a prop. You know why? Because it was given to me. More about that in a minute. If you're not in on the joke.
And you know what's so funny? I am what we're admitting police officers.
I ask you to put that prop away.
Well, it's not a prop. This is real.
It's not a prop.
He said I have a prop.
It's real.
It is considered a prop, Mr. Walker.
It ain't Texas. Maybe the Texas Ranger can get away with that on the debate stage. But Herschel. So today we are not here to discuss the Georgia Senate race. As a matter of fact, we're not even here to discuss whether or not that was a real badge. We can tell you that ours definitely was. It belonged to a U.S. Marshal. Now, we did not steal it off a U.S. Marshal. This wallet was gifted to us. Whether or not Native Snoop over in Olala, Washington. Olala, that's why I met Native Snoop. That's what he called himself, and he did look like a native Snoop Dogg. And he gave me this, and he swiped. Well, it was swiped. Speaking of swiped, seems Tulsi Gabbard has swiped left. In other words, she's left the Democratic Party. She has announced she has left the left. Now, this is what happens when rights left. In other words, when our basic freedoms and rights have left, and when the party that was predominantly liberal and progressive has shifted ever farther to the right. By kowtowing to individualist groups, Tulsi Gabbard calls him out directly in what is ultimately the first episode of her new podcast, The Tulsi Gabbard Show. She cites an appreciation and respect for the Aina, the land. My mom grew up here in Hawaii, on the Big Island where we currently are now. Our family roots go back to the mid-1800s, as far as we can tell, back before Hawaii was part of the United States. What inspired Tulsi's podcast wasn't an appreciation for the island that I love, that she is calling on her fellow Democrats to leave the party. When she was 21, she decided to get involved in politics for the first time, and Tulsi ran for Hawaii Senate, registered as a Democrat, yet insisted she registered as an independent Democrat. She specifically cites at the time the Republican Party was the party of big business and warmonger elites. She proclaims she can no longer remain in the Democratic Party. What we propose is essentially the parties have flipped. Now, this is sort of standard procedure. Any political analyst will tell you and maybe cite 1992's Bill Clinton presidency as a fundamental shift in the Democratic Party. However, this is something entirely different. We consider this present situation to be a crisis of unprecedented magnitude. Now, unprecedented has been sucked dry. The pandemic propagandists who really just diminish the words hero for wearing a face mask. Unprecedented when it pertains to a novel virus. The language has been watered down, just as the Democratic Party exhausted the language calling the Orange Man every name in the book. And when the Orange Man really did go and commit some atrocities, if he did, the language was gone. Therefore, the alarm bells had been rung so many times, it was background noise. And what are we on, the third impeachment trial? The party is so fundamentally broken that we decided enough was enough, and we threw all in behind Bernie Sanders. And this was back in the day, yes, 2016 to be more specific. We went down to the city of Seattle. This was right before it got disgusting and fell apart. We went to the stadium, and we heard a champion for people's rights pour his heart out And we were amongst thousands, tens of thousands of people that were there for the same reason. And we felt that energy for the first time. This was our first major political event. And being progressive minded, being a Democrat, living in a Democrat-ran state, Washington State, we had no problem getting behind Bernie Sanders' platform, all but 2 or 3 things. Now, this isn't specifically cited in the former Congresswoman's message, call to exodus of the Democratic Party. However, it is extremely important when it comes to realizing how these ideologies have shifted, because Tulsi specifically cites the Republican Party being the party of warmonger elites, fanatic ideologues, she calls them, back when she was 21. The statement that the Democratic Party is now full of fanatic ideologues who are war-hungry, elitists, it's the same language.
This is violent speech with corporate for-profit media and big tech to smear and silence political opponents and anyone who dares to challenge their authority, their narrative, and therefore exposing their insecurities. Not too long ago, the Biden administration even tried launching their own Ministry of Truth with the objective of controlling what information we are allowed to read, hear, and say. They will determine what is misinformation, what is true, and what is not. Now, their ideology is one of hate and divisiveness, rather than respect and love, aloha. And they stand diametrically opposed to traditional liberalism, which recognizes the basic goodness of people and the autonomy of the individual, supporting civil liberties, supporting a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now tell me, how can a political party that is opposed to freedom be trusted with our democracy?
When you factor in the amount of taxes, the fact that not only are we spending more to buy things that cost more, but our money is worth less. Even Mr. Washington, even George has turned his back on the Democratic Party, and he's looking toward the right. Why would that be? Well, it has a little something to do with, you might recall when they released the state quarters, all the states had their each quarter. Well, now they are celebrating women of history who have influenced our culture or politosphere, and the woman that designed the quarter made an announcement and did address the fact that George Washington is now flipped and facing the opposite direction. However, she made it out to be nothing more than a artistic sentiment with no further meaning to be derived behind it. To continue to Tulsi's video, she cites the rule of law as the first reason why the Democratic Party has fallen apart. She brings up the fact that they are weaponizing institutions. Now, Tulsi never says the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid. She does not say that. We are saying that. Tulsi calls them out for weaponizing the institutions that are supposed to be to protect the people. The former Congresswoman then went on to cite an example of pro-life protesters who were blockading an abortion clinic. There were 11 of them. They were arrested, and 7 of the 11 are facing 11 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. In stark contrast to the protesting that went on and on outside Senate, Supreme Court leaders' houses, senators' houses, more specifically Brett Kavanaugh's family home. Whether or not Kavanaugh is worth his weight in salt, Freudian slip, Kavanaugh. It's beside the point. We cannot treat individuals as if they are above the law, and we cannot treat certain entities or organizations as if they are exempt from the laws that govern the rest of the population. We can't pick and choose which rights are more valuable and worthy of protecting than others. When we start doing that, as Tulsi goes on to end her video, we allow those in charge to literally create what truth means. In fact, we are now in the third quarter of a recession. Instead of tackling the problem and admitting that, yes, there are the economic qualifications present for a recession, what the Democratic Party did was literally change the definition, the working definition, not the legal definition, but they changed the working definition of the word recession, the one that they've been using as a metric for dozens of years, if not since recession was a thing. I mean, it's fundamentally wrong. And speaking of fundamental, Amendment number 1, Tulsi goes on to cite freedom of speech as the next reason why she is leaving the Democratic Party. This is reason number 1 as to why we left the Democratic Party back in 2020, when we released our initial video, When Rights Left. Since then, our ideology has evolved, as has our passion, going more from music, hip-hop, spoken word poetry into free speak spot, politics, spiritual philosophy. Episodic interviews where we will be sitting down with people who maybe disagree with us, maybe have different perspectives. We will sit down with experts in their field, people who are extremely passionate. We will sit down with those of controversial background, discussing content that would otherwise be difficult to talk about. DaamnTalk is where we have the damn talk, because to not have the talk is to, well, how does the great Dr. Jordan Peterson put it? To talk without thinking is like shooting without taking aim. And we like to hit what we shoot at. When we make a point, we like it to stick. So we might lay it on thick. Today's Democratic Party does not believe in freedom of speech, period. In fact, they believe in freedom of censorship. Look, here's the deal. Here's the damn deal. For-profit media is as powerful as the government because they've merged with big tech. And big tech is not some pseudonym, some vague concept that doesn't exist. Big tech is essentially the top 5 technical organizations that are social media companies, Meta being one of them. You realize Messenger, Facebook, Instagram, it's all Zuckerberg. We're posting our open diaries on a recorded line. This is in part due to the Patriot Act of 2001, something Miss Gabbard brings up as having opposed. Essentially, she brought it to their attention and they refused to call a vote. Now, we did a little digging into this and couldn't find much other than some information on the Patriot Act itself, which we will present to you momentarily. First, the Biden administration created their own Ministry of Truth, so to speak. Joe Biden's top aide approached Mark Zuckerberg and worked with Facebook to bury the Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, if you only consume mainstream media, not only do I feel like I need to just give you a big hug and tell you it's going to be okay, but also you may not have even heard about said laptop and what was on it. You go check the DaamnTalk Daily Daam. There's a few posts and stories. I think we posted a video of Hunter Biden smoking crack alongside his father, talking about what the penalty should be for people caught with crack. You know, the hypocrisy is so blatant, it's so out there, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore. I believe that not only have the parties flipped, but essentially they are using the language that has evolved both naturally and artificially, the words and verbiage we use to communicate and consume information. They are using that to manipulate us. Call it real life algorithms. Propaganda. It's real. Up until, I would say, the last 2 elections, the Patriot Act aside, it still didn't infringe upon our freedom of speech. What led to this fundamental transgression or digression of freedom? Overcorrection. It's not enough that we have to denounce the racism and racists of the past, but we have to completely wipe them from our history. We have to take down the statues and the monuments. We have to change the names of institutions because we have to make sure that we save face. Because saving face is more important than actually addressing the inner workings that are integral to systematic racism and preventing systematic racism in the future. Instead, we'd rather just polish the trophy, you know, polish the trophy instead of banging out the dents. Freedom of speech is amendment number 1 for a reason. Freedom of speech is the reason why we've essentially shifted ourselves from primarily making music, whether spiritual or political, shout out Nurmag Black, to damn, to sitting back and going, damn, we need to start the conversation. We need to jump in. We need to get involved. We need to create a podcast similar to the Joe Rogan Experience, similar to what Tulsi Gabbard is now doing. And this is a project we've been working off and on since 2015. Don't just obey. Freedom of religion. She gives specific examples of restrictions by Democrats. She cites Obama, Americans clinging to their guns and religion. Quote, the Democratic Party of today has forgotten that freedom of religion does not mean freedom from religion. Tulsi Gabbard. It's a great quote. I wouldn't be surprised if they made that a meme already. Our government must respect our deeply personal relationship with God. Whether you believe in God or not isn't the point. End quote. And she's right. Not just on the surface. By the very nature of what she said, there is no disputing that as sovereign individuals, our personal relationship with God is nobody's business but ours and God's. The Democratic Party disagrees, just as the Democratic Party disagrees that our relationship to our children is between us and our children. Tulsi goes as far as to cite specific examples of administrations threatening to call CPS, and in some cases calling CPS to take their children away, to refuse gender-affirming treatment and gender-affirming care in young children. What can we say that hasn't been said besides this ideology is so backwards, and it is unbelievable how so many people don't see the blatant hypocrisy in it. Gender-affirming treatment? If my son comes to me and says, my teacher said that I might be a girl, gender-affirming treatment would be, no son, you're a boy, You might feel like a girl sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you are a girl. That is not how it works. That is not biology. That is not, first of all, it's not spirituality, because they are way too young to make that decision on their own, and to affirm their identity would be to reassure them of that. But it seems there's a huge disagreement, because gender affirming surgery would be to literally castrate my son. And the state would threaten me if I stepped in to intervene. Not only should we be leaving the party that promotes this ideology, we should be doing everything we can to stand up and oppose this radical philosophy that does not belong in 2022 and beyond, period. As a new father, but it is a battle that I will fight daily. And it starts here in the state of Hawaii. There are changes that we can make, and I would call on Miss Gabbard to devote part of her show, as she has, be a fellow voice of the Ohana, the Hawaii Ohana. Let's talk about the issues here, because on the Big Island where I reside, or Oahu where Tulsi is, there are some intrinsic issues that are systematic, and they go hand in hand with the federal level that is setting precedent for municipalities and different jurisdictions on the local level. And we change the local level when the federal government, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. Thomas Jefferson. Second Amendment rights. As Obama said, Americans cling to their guns and religion. Democrats are so wrong to try and take away our Second Amendment right to carry. We don't get to decide which rights in the Constitution are more worthy of protecting. That's a quote. That's from Tulsi's podcast. Democrats are wrong to try and take away our Second Amendment right. It is the Second Amendment right after the freedom to speak our mind. Because essentially, what do the oppressed and the poor have? They have words. That's it. If you take away our freedom to speak, we have nothing. The pen is mightier than the sword, and the Democratic Party knows that. Therefore, restricting the freedom of speech in the guise of fact-checking, in the guise of political censorship? Absolutely not. We've been threatened by YouTube and Facebook more times than we've had our pinky snag because it hangs out a little to the right. Which is a few times. Not a lot, obviously. Anyway, I digress. Ultimately, Tulsi Gabbard brings her podcast around to civil liberties. She states that while in Congress, she introduced legislation to appeal the Patriot Act. The Democratic Party went from treating her like the AOC of 2020, which is what they treated Tulsi like back in the day, to treating her like the Sarah Palin of whenever. Our point is, it is all about civil liberties. The Statue of Liberty is in the water because when our grandparents got off the boat, they weren't immediately granted freedom, but they were granted liberty because they were still sovereign individuals. Now, once they went through the proper process to become United States citizens, then they would get those freedoms and rights. But these freedoms and rights now are being freely given by the Democratic Party. Not just at a federal level, but we have sanctuary cities popping up in primarily Democratic-run states all over our country. These are cities that are proclaiming themselves higher than the federal government. In other words, if you're deportable, if you're here illegally, if you're an alien, if you're a non-citizen who is broken in essentially to our home, then you can just go to one of these cities, and not only will we not extradite you, but we will give you a food card. And now we're talking about maybe even letting you vote. Yeah, America, come on over. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, not sorry. We believe in borders. If I didn't have walls, this wouldn't be a room. We create the space, just as we've created a safe space here at DaamnTalk to talk about the issues that matter. The party in charge with Biden's administration has created a country that is a free-for-all. And when we have a governor like Ron DeSantis ship 50 illegal immigrants on a bus up the country to Mar-a-Lago, well, then it's an issue. Then it's talked about. Within 24 hours, all 50 of those illegal immigrants were rounded up and sent elsewhere. Because the people that vote for these policies don't have to put up with the ramifications of them. And that's a problem. That's a problem just like police officers not living in the communities that they police. That's the same sort of problem. Civil, civil, civil. Civilized. Civilization. Civil liberties. Sovereignty. Democratic leaders use identity politics to tear us apart. Modern-day segregation in schools is led by self-identified Marxists leading the Black Lives Matter movement. Democrats embrace this ideology. Now, this is all from Miss Gabbard's podcast. She goes on to call the Democratic Party anti-woman by rejecting the reality and objective truth that women exist and aren't a construct of mind. This goes hand in hand with reshaping the definition of the words we use. If they can control our speech, they can control our thoughts. They can control our actions, the way we vote, obviously. Because essentially, when we allow any organization to change what we know to be true, there's no limits within our society. There are no rules. This would be the first step into our demise. The falling apart of America. Whether civil war or not, within the last couple years we saw all these cities on fire and it being downplayed by major media. George Floyd riots, Black Lives Matter. Whatever happened to Occupy? The 99%. We went from working on Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020 to voting for Donald Trump in 2020. Tulsi Gabbard claims the Biden administration is trying to remove the word woman from Title IX. You may remember Title IX being the women's champion legislation that was passed Obama era. And to remove the word woman from this piece of legislation is a direct insult. It's a direct line of fire into the whole movement, into all the progress that was made on behalf of women, since women weren't allowed to vote and had to petition in the streets and make noise to get the same rights as other American citizens. And now, if I decide I'm a woman, apparently to the Democratic Party, I can be a woman. I'm a woman right now. And now I'm a man. Now I'm a woman again. Now I'm a man. See the problem here? Of course. But for some reason, they can't give us a clear definition. What is a woman? They want to change mother to birthing parent. Now, I do believe Tulsi Gabbard made quite an impact when she ran for president. On the debate stage, in the very least, she accomplished taking Kamala Harris down a couple pegs, which needed to happen and was awesome to watch. Maybe the biggest thing that the largest, most profound prediction that we can make about the coming years, 2024 coming up, when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard, we don't believe she wants to get back into politics just yet. She's creating conversation such as we do and hope to achieve here at DaamnTalk with the Tulsi Gabbard podcast. Go check it out. Hear what she's had to say. We've done a fair bit of research as well as citing from memory, having been involved with the 99% movement at a young age, of course, but being 9 years old when we saw the towers fall. We watched people jump out of buildings. I was watching Cartoon Network. Every channel was New York City. Didn't go to school that day. I started paying attention, forming opinions. The Patriot Act is what 9/11 gave birth to. Essentially, the Patriot Act was designed to, well, I'll read it to you verbatim. We went to us.gov. The top result, the Patriot Act of 2001 is to deter and punish terrorist attacks in the U.S. and around the world. Scrolling down to the fifth result, us.gov. The Patriot Act eliminates double standards by allowing agents to pursue terrorists with the same tools they use as other criminals. Now that's from George Bush whitehouse.archives.gov. Straight from the horse's mouth. Here's the damn deal. We absolutely detest the language of this legislation. Here's why. Two particular words stand out: terrorist and criminals. Three particular words now stand out: terrorists, criminals, and resources. Let's read this again. The Patriot Act eliminates double standards by allowing agents to pursue terrorists with the same tools they use as other criminals. Now, not every criminal is a terrorist, but every terrorist damn sure is a criminal. That said, as fact, what does a citizen have to do to become criminal? How do you go from citizen to criminal? Yeah, exactly. You break the law. Let's think this through. If one were to be suspected of a crime, law enforcement has the authority to utilize tools, resources, as regulated by law to determine whether or not any given action is indeed criminal and therefore justifiable of further action. But even though this does sound like the earlier definition, it is fundamentally not. To eliminate double standards by treating terrorists with the same tools as other criminals, well, to equate terrorist attack with criminal act is like pedophile to sex offender. Sure, it's sort of in the same bracket, but it's like the Boston Marathon to a weekend in Chicago. Both bad, both maybe one very bad. They're not the same. Therefore, arguably, they should be handled differently, separately, because different resources are called for in different situations. Different tools are made for different jobs. And to suspect one of being a terrorist is not the same as to suspect one of being a criminal. An officer has to prove criminal intent or criminal act to therefore arrest them and to violate their freedoms and constitutional rights. But with the Patriot Act, any suspected terrorist can now have their rights broken and violated, which is anyone, any United States citizen. The Patriot Act does nothing more than give the federal government permission to treat citizens like criminals. By granting them privilege to our personal information free of scrutiny, we get security. In exchange for our freedom, equity. In trade for our privacy, reason. In compromise of our constitutional rights. And we say no more. Tulsi said no more. On parents' rights when determining the lives of their children and the role that the government has in the lives of their children. You may be familiar with the Don't Say Gay bill. If you watch mainstream media, that's probably what you heard it called, but it's not called that. We went to parentsrightsandeducation.org. This is directly from their site. Everyone seems to have personal rights today, everyone that is, except parents. Parents have more rights than they realize. It's time for parents to learn about their rights, raise their voices, and protect their children. The United States Supreme Court ruled 5 times in favor of parental rights, overturning state control of children. Oregon has violated these rulings by passing laws superseding those rights. In other words, the state of Oregon has deemed themselves higher than the federal government. The child is not the mere creature of the state of Oregon. By forcing parents to place their children in public school, unreasonably interfere with the liberty of parents and guardians to direct the upbringing of their children under their control. That is Pierce versus Society of Sisters, a Supreme Court case. Those who aren't familiar with FERPA, as we were not familiar with FERPA, FERPA stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Now, this is essentially a federal version of the Don't Say Gay bill that originated in Florida. A federal law affirming parents' rights to privacy, protecting the right of parents to access all information about their child from the school. Access their children's educational records. Educational records includes files, documents, and other materials maintained by the educational institution that is directly related to the student. FERPA gives both parents, custodial and non-custodial, equal access to student information unless the school has evidence of a court order or state law revoking these rights. In other words, unless there is a preordained case or sanction by the government, then the school is fully transparent about the child with the child's parent, which kind of seems like common sense, maybe? Goes on to say FERPA will confirm the accuracy and seek to have the records amended. FERPA requires schools and local education agencies to annually notify parents of their rights under FERPA. The notice must effectively inform parents with disabilities or who have a primary home language other than English. Therefore, they really are covering the bases to make sure that if a child is enrolled in public school, and therefore the parents are entrusting the federal government to teach their children, the federal government will be transparent about what they are teaching their children. Consent to disclose of personal identifiable information. This is sort of like the HIPAA Act. In fact, it is very much like the HIPAA Act. The relationship between the student, teacher, and parent will be, well, essentially parents alone will have the authority to permit the release of the child's information. not the school, not the teacher, or the board, or of directors, or any of such thing. Not even the principal. Tell him to come to my office. Damn, principal. I'll tell you why we have such issue with these organizations, whether a state government or not. You cannot supersede the federal government, the law of the land. It doesn't work like that. Now, what's in the so-called Don't Say Gay bill that could impact the whole country? House Republicans have introduced legislation that some critics are describing as a national Don't Say Gay bill, inspired by the controversial Florida law that bans instruction on gender identity and sexual orientation in kindergarten through third grade classes. If the federal bill were to become law, which is unlikely in the current Congress, its effects could be far more sweeping, affecting not just instruction in schools, but also events and literature at any federally funded institution. Here's what's in the bill and what people are saying about it. The bill's language is broad and consequential. The measure was introduced on this Tuesday, by Representative Mike Johnson and co-sponsored by 32 other Republicans. Quote, the Democrat Party and their cultural allies are on a misguided crusade to immerse young children in sexual imagery and radical gender ideology, end quote. Johnson said this, calling the bill common sense. The bill called the Stop the Sexualization of Children Act, not Don't Say Gay, Stop the Sexualization of Children. Gee, why would you oppose such a thing? Why would you want to sexualize my young child? The language in the proposed legislation lumps together topics of sexual orientation and gender identity with sexual content, such as pornography and stripping. It would prohibit federal funds from being used to support any sexually oriented programs, events, and literature for children under 10. Ban federal facilities from hosting or promoting such events or literature, and allowing parents and guardians to sue government officials, agencies, and private entities if a child under 10 is exposed to such materials. The bill complains that some school districts have implemented sex ed programming for kids under 10, and that many newly implemented sexual education curriculums encourage discussion of sexuality, sexual orientation, transgenderism, and gender ideology as early as kindergarten. It calls out events such as drag queen story hours in libraries, which it describes as sexually oriented. For those who aren't familiar with Drag Queen Story Hour, just take a quick visit to Google or YouTube, or Rumble would be even better. Rumble is what YouTube used to be back in the day. Type in Drag Queen Story Hour. See exactly what it is the Progressive Party wants to bring in and teach our children. As a father of a 2-year-old boy, I, for one, am outraged and grateful that I am not alone in speaking out. This bill sounds like common sense to us as well. The bill follows GOP-driven parental rights measures in Florida and elsewhere. The proposed federal measure is framed in terms of parental rights, a rallying cry on the right that in the last couple years has included battles against schools' COVID-19 vaccine requirements and fervent activism against critical race theory in classrooms. For those of you who aren't familiar with CRT, critical race theory, we will go into that here in a moment. In March, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law the Parental Rights and Education Bill, which was deemed the Don't Say Gay bill. It banned public schools personnel from conducting classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity in kindergarten through third grade. In other words, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, decided it was not a good idea to allow the public schools to bring in sexual content to kindergarten through third graders. And this was attacked by the Democratic Party. attacked so rudely that they deemed it a "don't say gay" bill, as if they framed it. They tried to frame it as an attack on gay rights. Critical race theory is another flaw in the education system right now. Essentially, Wikipedia defines critical race theory as a cross-disciplinary examination by social and civil rights scholars and activists of how laws, social and political movements, and media shape and are shaped by social conceptions of race and ethnicity. Goals include challenging all mainstream and alternative views of racism and racial justice, including conservative, liberal, and progressive. The word critical in the name is an academic reference to critical thinking, critical theory, and scholarly criticism, rather than criticizing or blaming people. However, what Wikipedia has failed to take into account is that this ideology blatantly suggests that if one is not being oppressed, they are the oppressor. As if there's not a third option, or a fourth, or fifth, or sixth. Only two brackets, only two parties. We must pick. The American way. CRT is also used in sociology to explain social, political, and legal structures and power distribution, as through the lens focusing on the concept of race and experiences of racism. We will leave Wikipedia behind now. This is from edpost.com, explained the truth about CRT and how it shows up in your child's classroom. Critical race theory, sometimes abbreviated as CRT, is an intellectual approach in looking at U.S. society with the belief that racism is at the core of its laws and institutions. This is a much better working definition for what we believe CRT to be. If you are not oppressing, you are the oppressor. Every institution in the United States is systemically racist. We're not claiming that. That is what this content that is now sanctioned by the largest Democratic-ran educational institution in the country has endorsed critical race theory. Critical race theorists base this thinking on a few important observations. Race is a social construct that doesn't have anything to do with biological differences among people, including differences in intelligence or physical ability. This became definitively clear after the Human Genome Project. The U.S. and all of its laws and institutions were founded and created based on the myth of white supremacy. The assumption that lighter skin and European ancestry meant that white people were better and deserved a higher social and economic position than people of color. Because racism is embedded within our systems and institutions, codified in law and woven into American public policy, this racial inequality is replicated and maintained over time. Thus, systemic racism shows up in nearly every facet of life for people of color. CRT aspires to empower voices that have been marginalized, embracing the lived experiences of people of color through research, storytelling, and counter-storytelling. Placed in historical, social, and political context, is critical to scholarship that examines race and racism in society. This article so far has not addressed why it is so widely objected upon. It is blatantly racist in itself. This is systemic racism. By teaching our children that they are racist, that America is racist, and if you're not oppressing someone then you're being oppressed. If you're not, it's counterintuitive, but further than that, it's wrong. Why is critical race theory relevant today? In a perfect world, educational equity would ensure that all students have access to high-quality curriculum, instruction, and funding. But we don't live in a perfect world, so racial inequality manifests in a number of ways in American education. There's that word again. You may have seen Kamala Harris, Vice President, throw out in response to Hurricane Ian that FEMA should focus more on providing relief based on equity. In other words, those who are less fortunate should get help first from a natural disaster. This is as nonsensical as critical race theory itself. This is as nonsense as Drag Queen Story Hour, as telling that my son that he can be a girl and keeping it from me as a teacher. This is as nonsense as claiming that inflation has nothing to do with our policies and everything to do with Russia. We are sick of the damn nonsense, and we are absolutely with Miss Gabbard. You don't have to be a Republican, but you can't be a Democrat. We're not Republican by any means. Spiritual conservatism, spiritual republicanism, real liberalism, independent thinking, conspiracy theory, passion, politosphere, conscious, controversy, continual content, conversation. Come join the DaamnTalk. DaamnTalk. I'm DaamnKam. This has been DaamnTalk episode 132, I believe, response to Tulsi Gabbard's announcement she is leaving the Democratic Party. If you watch this far, please head over to www.DaamnTalk.com, sign up to our newsletter. The next 10 people who subscribe will be getting a personal letter in the mail, as well as a United States Mint quarter that will show Mr. Washington looking toward the right now. The next 10 subscribers will receive 2022 Mint quarters. We would like to end this video by suggesting one little proposition. We would like to suggest that if our main goal is to create a government that is by the people, of the people, and for the people, maybe we should protect the people's right to talk amongst themselves. Maybe we should not put up with censorship in the form of fact-checking by these major media, social media institutions. I'm calling you out directly, Zuckerberg. We've done it before. Interestingly, caught flack. Some Facebook users defending its founder. We don't understand that. We look to Dave Rubin rather than Mark Zuckerberg. Dave Rubin created Locals.com. Locals.com is what Facebook could have been if Zuckerberg wasn't a soul-sucking reptilian creature. However, Locals, you will find DaamnTalk, the free Speak Spot community. You will find full, unedited interviews with myself and the interesting guests that we have in the Joe Rogan Experience format. Episodic interviews for members only. Yeah, that's right, there is a paywall. Therefore, we are not subject to the scrutiny of the judicial system. We do have our own community standards, and breaking those is grounds for dismissal. However, in order to have standards, we need to be able to discuss what constitutes breaking them. If we want to acknowledge hate speech exists, we should be able to talk amongst ourselves and define what constitutes said hate speech. But no, it seems those on the left and the organizations that are influencing them would rather we kowtow and fall in line in the name of freedom and allowing individuals to be whoever they want to be in the moment. Whether you feel like Cake or Zed or Purr or those identifying as cats now. It's gotten to the point where truth is being assaulted. Truth is the fundamental ideology. Universal truth is what we believe in. That is our religion. And universal truth is under threat. Call them warmonger elitists. Call them fanatical ideologues. Call them crazy Democrats. There's crazy Republicans too. Plenty of them. What we can do, besides voting, is create these conversations. Write articles, post them in the DaamnTalk community. You can monetize and actually make money from your contribution, your content. You can link your wallet, get paid. Right now, you can join Locals, that DaamnTalk spot, for only $2 a month. This is only through the end of the year. Then it's going to go up, but it only takes 2 to talk. So it's $2 a month, DaamnTalk.com, where you'll find a link to Locals, where you can register for only $2. You can talk to other group members, post, you can interact, you can create your own content, monetize, get paid, make the $2 back up. You're in there. Subscribe to our newsletter, email list, and you'll get the US Mint quarter, and then, hey, you only spent $175 to join up for the month. DaamnTalk. Why not? Why not? Come on, girls, cats, guys, Zeds, whoever, whatever your preferred pronoun may be. We want to see you there. www.DaamnTalk.com, where people precede information. Aloha.
Was a young age, I've been putting in long nights and hard days, writing lines, giving life to a blank page. Rhyme steady, spin around in this mind cage. Already had me in a blind rage, going sideways, trying to figure out my place. Stay awake, keeping pace as my mind race. Close my eyes, seeing lights on a bright stage. Like Biggie Smalls, it was all a dream. Reality lies behind the scenes of a rhyme fiends. Put your pens up if you know what I mean. All the time spent polishing your craft. People ask what you do and tell them they would laugh. The smile is a mask trying to conceal the fact their ass doesn't quite measure up to the task. Underneath it they be wishing they had what you have. Man, I find it so enticing. The very thing I view as enlightening, others find frightening. 'Tis the season to keep on writing, a reason to believe in and keep on fighting for my people. Damn, you know that I read for them, and if the day comes to do it, I would bleed for them. When it came down to it, I will be for them. Never give effort to put anything before them. You know, it's a music trip, a trip to make music till the cards will flip, so you can listen to it while we rewrite the script. They don't realize that old car's clutch might stick. Change the tides or they'll sink our ship, and never will we quit till we've got what we'll get. My lyrics are equipped with more of a grip than them toasters and roasters on soldiers' hips. So, I'll be making a list of the people standing with me who are reading my lips. Forget raising a flag, we're busy raising a fist. Police changing a mag, Wall Street counting tips. It's a big game of tag if you catch my drift. Democrats, Republicans continue to switch, so I live how I spit, can only give what I get. Sick of politics with people who just don't give a shit. Goddamn, it's aggravating, hearing people complaining on the daily, debating, constantly rearranging, contently waiting. It's amazing, nobody's moving tides were the changing. Yet we are continually fouled, kicked around and kept down, told what's allowed. You've taught us a lesson how together we're proud. So I'm shouting out this message forever from my mouth. That's the reason I do it. Put pen to paper, how I pursue it. American dream? What are we, stupid? I fell out of love when that eagle ate Cupid. The moment I awoke was when I was freed. As once I was blind, now I can see. No longer spend time trying to find that key. The way I'll succeed is for me to be me, and for you to be you. Go find yourself and follow your truth. Stop learning lessons that you already knew. Don't give confession, then keep on doing what you do. Understand that you're one of a kind. Anybody tells you different, then they're feeding you a lie. To digest that garbage, don't even try. Wanna reach your destination, then realize you've arrived. At that point, you're no longer disguised. Once you're in it to begin it, then your limit is the skies. And you can join our cause, help our people break down them walls. Together we're strong, but divided we'll fall. So whenever we're wronged, we keep on standing tall. They'll try to get us to quit it. Before we finish, we get it. We did it, admit it, it's twisted, so say fuck them all. My people sick of being kept in the basement. The promise of equality is somehow adjacent. Working 9 to 5 as we wonder where the day went. Just another day spent slaving to pay rent. Healthcare, education, both vacant. Every other spot seems to be taken. Day out and day in, go out or stay in. At a loss for inspiration. We didn't start this revolution, they did. Cease with confusion, it's time to face it. Provoking us to do it, the instinct's basic. You can drop that ball, we ain't gon' chase it. You keep giving shit, but we ain't gon' take it. It's red, white, and blue, but the stars are faded. We wanna believe it's true so badly we can taste it. But now we know you ain't got what it takes for us to make it.